us today on To My Way of Thinking is a gentleman that really doesn't need any introduction around these parts. He has been a policeman. He has been sheriff of Duval County. He has been president of a major now university, Edward Waters College, and he has been a contributing citizen in this community. We talk to the tree shakers, policymakers, and those who've made a difference in our community. Welcome, Nathaniel Glover, Nat Glover. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Fred. I'm glad to be here.
All right, glad you could make it. Well, let's dive right into it. There's a lot happening in our city and around the country. What's the state of our city? What's the state of Jacksonville?
Well, frankly, from my perspective, I'm very, very proud of Jacksonville. And when I talk about how proud I am, I'm talking about pretty much diversity and how I see our city. And I do see it being somewhat progressive. And if you look at the diversity in the city, you see we've made some major gains. You're talking about the former sheriff here, and yours truly. We've had an African-American mayor here in Jacksonville. We've had city council leadership, president and vice president, city council leadership. And actually, this was the second president of the city council that happened to be African-American. As you know, Warren Jones was as well some time back. And then you look across the spectrum, you will see that African Americans have held major positions here in Jacksonville as well. I mean, below the elected position, we're actually entertaining a school superintendent who happened to be African American, and incidentally, she succeeded school superintendent that also African American, who was, of course, there temporarily. But I think that's very progressive when you look at JTA and the Jacksonville Port and all of those led by African Americans. So when you hear people say we're not making progress, I think we are. You can look at two African Americans. One heads the YMCA here in Jacksonville. Another we have heading up the Police and Fire Pension Fund, which is a $2 billion fund. So I think when we look at Jacksonville, I'm proud of what we have here. And I think we should tell a story.
Well, that's what this is all about. You're taking a pretty positive approach to our city, and that's a good thing. What about the divides that we have? So far, we've been able to get around a lot of the political divides that we have, Republican versus Democrat, and progressive versus conservative. And we'll talk about this a bit more in a few minutes. And of course, for the candidates, as we speak right now, we're on the verge of a couple of elections. Statewide elections are coming up here shortly. And then next spring, we do another turnover for city council and mayoral races. But do you see any widening of the gap between progressive forces and conservative forces in Duval County?
Well, actually, I think I see a little more than there have been in the most recent history. Now, but I think it has something to do with the national picture. When we look at our politics on the national scene, our politics is pretty toxic. You know, the philosophical approach with the two-party system is that you have different views, conservative views, and some say liberal views. And the citizens are supposed to benefit from that diversity because we usually come together and we come out with a solution that would be a broad solution that will benefit everybody. Well, that's not the case now. What we're looking at in this toxic environment is too often, if one side say yes, the other side will say no, and sometimes it doesn't matter the merits of the issue. It's just another example of how they can oppose each other. And I think the citizens in this country lose the benefit of that um, environment the way it's supposed to work. But I think we're in a period now, some might call it an era, where we got to work our way through this. Historically, we've had challenges in this country, and through time, we've had some what we call statespersons step up and make the kind of inroads that need to be made, and somehow we'll come back together. And that's what I'm hoping for. But right now, it's a pretty toxic environment.
But you don't feel that toxicity has necessarily reached Duval County?
I think so. It's been a little bit of it statewide and local. But when we look local, party politics has less of an impact. And I don't see the dramatic impact in the party politics, other than people who declare their party, and they usually stay loyal to that. When I was elected sheriff, I had broad support from both parties, and I think that it's not unusual for people who get elected to have people cross those lines. But here in Jacksonville, I don't think the party politics are as toxic as it is national, and to some degree as it is statewide. So we are enjoying an environment here where I think for the most part, the politicians are trying to do what's best for Jacksonville. And I think that's the reason that we've made so much progress.
Well, during your term as sheriff, you're right. It was quite a historical moment. And as we speak, all of the candidates that are running for sheriff are African American. Ironically, 4 Democrats and 1 Republican are running. All of them have the distinction of having worked for you or worked with you at one point in time. What do you see as a state of law enforcement at this point?
Well, I first thing, I'm proud to see that, and also think that this city should be proud to see it. When I started to run for sheriff, there were so many cynical people who said it was no way that would happen, was no way that the citizens of Jacksonville would turn the law enforcement agency over to an African American. And in Jacksonville proved them wrong. Now we have 5 African Americans running for sheriff. See, I happen to think that also is a historical moment, and it's happening here in Jacksonville, Florida, not Central Florida, not South Florida, but in North Florida, in Jacksonville, Florida. Another example of this whole notion of, I think it's something special happening here in Jacksonville, but I'm afraid that we in Jacksonville are the only ones that know about it. So I would like to see that word get out a little bit better, as I indicated earlier.
One of the things that I remember about your term as sheriff, and I'm pretty sure you were the one who did it. You're the guy who put the names of the police officers on the cars. And that was a bit of a blowback because, nobody wanted to, at least the cops didn't want anybody necessarily know who was in the cruiser or who the cruiser belonged to. Why did you put the names of the officers on the cars?
Well, actually, and that's an excellent question, Fred. Actually, we were talking nationally, statewide, and locally about community policing. But when I looked at the law enforcement environment, I think that what I saw was a lot of checking the box and a lot of rhetoric, but the practices were not consistent in my mind. And of course, there were a lot of funds available for agencies who were practicing community policing, and of course, that's, to my thinking, was the reason that some of the agencies engaged in community policing. So what I decided to do was make it a reality. And you are correct. I started off with the putting the names of the police officers on their car, and I got pushback. I got pushback hugely from the police union, the police officers individually, and wives, grandmothers, and mothers of those officers. But I was convinced that this was just another one of those tumultuous times when you're looking at a transition or you're looking at a change. And of course, we pushed it. We came to an agreement with the Fraternal Order of Police that we would put the names on one side of the car instead of both sides, and gotten them to back off to some degree. And we sold the whole notion of the names on the cars to the officers and the benefit of it. And they were, of course, able to get used to it now. And that's one of those changes that prevails today.
Do you think that community policing, as you started with it then, do you think community policing has progressed any, or is there more that we can do with the community policing aspect for officers? I don't see as many officers on horseback as I once saw. Especially even in downtown, I don't see them, but particularly not in the neighborhoods. Is there more that we can do in concerning community policing?
Well, one of the things you have to do, Fred, is you have to convince the community that you are making them a part of this whole notion of community policing. See, what you're trying to do in a law enforcement environment, when you're talking about community policing, is that you have to demonstrate to the community by your actions that they are a part of that. Because listen, our police officers are not part of an occupied armed force in our cities. You need citizens' cooperation to be witnesses, and you need citizen participation in programs to be effective. And so the only way that you can get them to do that is to convince them. I'm not just saying check the box, because if you just check in the box, then they figure that out too. So if you can remember, I actually not only put the police officers' names on the cars, I walked the neighborhoods. I walked up to people's doors and knocked on the doors and asked them, how are we doing? I created citizens advisory councils in every neighborhood. We had dedicated citizens who were working with the police officers on a daily basis. And here's another thing that we did, and it doesn't get the publicity, but it was a big deal, right? We used to go into neighborhoods that was, had all kind of debris, and neighborhoods that seemed to have been not well maintained. And I would get some of my inmates out of the incarcerated environment, and we will go in the neighborhoods and clean them up. And I myself personally was working right alongside of those inmates, cleaning up those neighborhoods. See, when you do those kinds of gestures, then the people feel like you really mean what you say. And again, you're just not checking a box.
Mm. Bay Street, where the sheriff's office is located, and you get a grand view of the jail. Bay Street has changed astronomically since your time. Most of the buildings along Bay Street, along the riverfront, have been torn down. We had one blown up. Berkman 1 is still there, but Berkman 2 has been torn down. A developer is talking about putting a 40-story spire in its place. We've got a museum that's coming there. We've got a new Navy ship museum that's going to happen. And of course, Shad Khan has a major hotel development that he's going to put along the riverfront there. And the inmates in the jail get a great view of the fireworks at the 4th of July and all the other activities that take place on Bay Street. The folks who occupy Berkman Plaza and those who will be coming in get a great view of the jail and the sheriff's office. Do you think that we need to tear the jail down and move it to another location?
Well, I always think that we have people who actually have the vision, and they might have a concept of what that riverfront should look like in the downtown area. But I also believe in citizens' participation. And sometimes you find that those people out there that who are the subject of legislation and major changes, they might have some ideas too. So I'm one of those individuals that would say, let's go out with some progressive, design and changes, and take it to the people, and of course get their input, get their buy-in, and then let's move forward after we hear what they got to say about it.
Mm. You spent what I call the second half of your career in public as president of Edward Waters College, now Edward Waters University. What led you to go into education to that extent? I mean, you were one of the few officers, major administrators that did have a master's degree when you became sheriff. But what led you to go into education, and what did you find when you got to Edward Waters?
I'm so glad you asked me about that, Fred, because really, I spent 37 and a half years in law enforcement, and I can tell you that's a lot of people going to jail and presiding over a lot of people going to jail. And for me, having the opportunity to go and be a president of my alma mater, a president of an institution of higher learning, and graduate individuals who will now have the opportunity to be tax-paying, revenue-producing, and people who are contributing to our society. That was a big deal for me, and I often say it was a blessing. And I go a little bit further and say it was redemption as well, because when you put people in jail and then have the opportunity to go and educate generally that same age and population, that's a huge divine of forgiveness, and I just appreciate that. And you asked me what encouraged me to go. Well, I was asked by someone whom I trusted, and they convinced me that I was the right person at the right time. And I wasn't certain of that. I felt like Edward Waters needed maybe a career educator as his president. But if you remember then and now, you have what we call a number of non-traditional presidents. John Delaney is one of them, taking over institutions of higher learning and are doing a great job. So I was able to go in with the sense of, well, maybe I can make a difference, and was recognized twice as a nominee for HBCU Mayor President of the Year. So I think I made a difference, and I really appreciate that opportunity.
What did you find when you got there that you needed to tackle? What was under I'd say the top three things that you needed to tackle when you got to Edward Waters?
I needed to do three things. Number one, I needed to address this whole notion of people holding jobs that they feel like they are qualified on paper, and it doesn't make any difference about their performance. And I needed to address that. And so we had some major transitions of people who we had to actually, kind of process them out. Also, felt like that we had to make certain we address the physical plant at the institution. There were buildings in disrepair, and it caused a lack of. Felt like that we had to make certain we address the physical plant at the institution. There were buildings in disrepair, and it caused a lack of credibility in the community, and of course, it affected adversely the morale of employees and the student. So we had to clean that up, and then we had to address the academic side of it as well, and get the graduation rate up, and so we were able to do that. But I was only able to do it because we were able to resurrect some of the confidence and support of the general Jacksonville community, and we were able to raise the funds that would allow us to do it. And incidentally, also got quite a bit of help from the state and our local representatives here and the governor, and at that time, Rick Scott. And so we were able to do some things that, as I sit back and look at the results, and I'm very, very proud of.
Let's touch back to community engagement. You're still involved in a number of projects. Talk a bit about some of the projects that you're currently involved in. I see that you continue to put up education on your Facebook page as a major thing for you, but tell us a bit about the community engagement process for you, and how important is it?
Fred, I have come to the conclusion, and I've watched this all of my professional career, and I mentioned it a little earlier, and that is having people in positions who I'm going to say almost operating at a level of dysfunction. And the reason I find that a lot of them are operating at that level is because they've not been prepared to be put in those positions, and most of them are leadership positions. Now, when I was in my professional career, I was always able to, I would say, effectively lead people where they would function at a higher level.
Now, you're talking about from a nonprofit perspective, or are you talking about from those who are in elected or appointed positions, civically, politically?
Well, actually, when you elect someone, they go in whether they are prepared or not, but the whole idea is the fact that they presented themselves to the public, and this is what the public has decided that they want. But I'm talking about people holding leadership positions, from nonprofit to education to even government positions. They usually get promoted into those positions because of politics, or because maybe they perform well in another job, and they get cast in those positions of being over people. and responsible for people performance. See, that's two different skill sets. So I have dedicated most of my remaining life now to training people on the whole notion of the art of leadership and how to effectively lead people. And I would really like for that to be my legacy. And I want to share what I have experienced, what worked, what didn't work. And the biggest thing is having the courage to do what's necessary to make the changes necessary in order to be effective at the job that you're doing.
All right. Excellent. I'm going to talk about this briefly. I'm going to throw some names at you. I want you to tell me what you think. Jake Godbold.
I think it's legend here in Jacksonville. And I think Jake Godbold was one of those who won the affection of African Americans and people, senior citizens. And he was able to leverage that to being one of the effective mayors here in Jacksonville.
A step back in time.
Yes.
A step back in time. Hayden Burns.
Well, I didn't deal with Hayden Burns very much, just based on where I was at the stage in my life. But I remember him being the first mayor that I kind of can remember his name. So his accomplishments, I would say, apparently there was enough confidence in him that you still hear his name mentioned today, but I probably would not be the best one to speak about him because I don't know much about it.
Hans Tanzler.
Hans Tanzler, I would say, was a mayor that made an impact here in Jacksonville, and I think his reign was during the consolidation era, and with that, when you look back at Jacksonville being a consolidated city, you have to look back as that's a moment in history that he will get credit for.
All right, let's jump forward. Tommy Hazouri.
Tommy Hazouri, when you look at a person who served on the city council, who's mayor at one time, and people talking about his legacy, and to lose him with the kind of sadness that the city experienced, he obviously made an impact. And that being the case, I think that people will be talking about him for a while. You know, one of the things that I look at, if you had a significant position in any profession, and people be calling your name 5, 6, 10 years after you have passed on, then you've left a legacy worthy to be mentioned. Because fact of the matter is, sometime after we pass on, we're forgotten. And in too many instances, we didn't make a difference.
Alvin Brown.
Alvin Brown made history here in Jacksonville, Florida, and he will always be remembered as the first mayor of Jacksonville, Florida. That's a big deal. I am convinced that as we move forward, we will have other mayors, as it has become apparent that we will have more Black sheriffs. And when you leave a footprint such that others will want to walk in your shoes, then that's impactful. And he first mayor, and I have to say he will go down in history as well.
Just one step backwards. The state attorney, the former state attorney for Duval County, for this district, who left his profession and decided to jump into politics and became mayor. He stepped in as a Democrat, he converted over and became a Republican. Do you remember who he is?
John Delaney?
Not John. John served with him.
Yeah.
Uh,
So you have to be talking about Ed Austin.
Ed Austin.
Okay.
Ed Austin.
Well, yeah, Ed Austin will also be remembered. And I can tell you right now, if you ever talk to any of the attorneys that served under Ed Austin, he made an impact. Now think about this. Ed Austin was the state attorney here in Jacksonville, Florida. And at that time, there were so many African Americans complaining about African Americans being mishandled, mistreated, and actually were not being the recipient of justice in our criminal justice system. And the state attorney was the focus of that at one time. And Ed Austin, of course, left the state attorney's office, went into mayoral politics, went into a citywide campaign, and was elected the mayor of Jacksonville. That's a big deal. So apparently he made a difference. But as I indicated earlier, when you talk to any of the assistant state attorneys that work with Ed Austin, you will get the kind of stories that you will categorize him in the legendary category.
All right. You've partially answered this already, but a final question. What's next for Nat Glover?
Well, I'm trying to touch as many people as I can touch and trying to teach them the techniques, the practices that they need to implement in order to make a difference, not just hold a position and leave it like you found it, but leave a legacy. And that's what I'm teaching now, how to effectively lead people. And I'm actually kind of pumped up about it, Fred.
All right. All right. That is great. You're pumped up. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
Nathaniel Nat Glover, policeman, sheriff, college president, a citizen who contributes to the betterment of all of us. Nat, I want to thank you for giving us a bit of your time today, and I'd like to have you back. We're going to delve into a few other topics as they go, and probably come back after this short political season is done and see where we are going forward. Okay?
My pleasure.
All right. Thank you again.